On a freezing night in Manchester, New Hampshire, a 5-year-old girl disappeared, and for a long time, almost nobody realized she was gone. Her name was Harmony Montgomery. Small for her age, blonde, partially blind in one eye. Harmony lived inside a chaotic apartment shaped by drugs, instability, and constant conflict. According to people around the family, the adults' stories about her whereabouts kept changing depending on who was asking. At first, the explanation seemed simple enough. Harmony was with her mother. Harmony was staying somewhere else. Harmony would be back soon. But weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And somehow, no school reported her missing. No statewide search began. No one could clearly say the last time they had actually seen her alive. By the time investigators finally started digging deeper, the timeline around Harmony had already started falling apart. Conflicting stories, missing gaps, memories that no longer matched. Then came the detail that changed the entire case. Police began suspecting Harmony had not simply disappeared from the system. She may have died inside the very apartment where she was last believed to be living with her father, Adam Montgomery. But even now, years later, Harmony herself has never been found. And that's the part that continues haunting this case. Not just that a little girl vanished, but that she seemed to disappear from everyday life long before anyone truly started looking for her. Before Harmony Montgomery became one of the most disturbing missing child cases in America, she was just a little girl trying to find a place where she felt safe. Harmony was born on June 7, 2014, in Massachusetts. She entered the world already carrying challenges most children never face. She was partially blind in her left eye due to a condition connected to holoprosencephaly, a developmental disorder affecting the brain and vision. In photos, one eye often appeared cloudy while the other stayed bright and alert, constantly watching the people around her. People who cared for Harmony later described her as quiet, affectionate, and unusually cautious for such a young child. She loved pink toys, cartoons, and being close to whoever made her feel protected. But stability rarely lasted long in Harmony's life. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, struggled heavily with addiction. Her father, Adam Montgomery, was incarcerated when Harmony was born. Within months, Massachusetts Child Services had already removed Harmony from the home after multiple neglect reports connected to drug use and unsafe conditions. For most of her early childhood, Harmony moved through foster care placements and temporary reunifications. But one foster family, Tim and Michelle Raftery, became the closest thing she ever had to a normal home. There were routines there, meals on time, doctor appointments remembered, people paying attention when Harmony needed help with her eye. For a while, life finally seemed quieter. Then, in February 2019, a Massachusetts judge made a decision that would later become one of the most criticized parts of the entire case. Despite a long criminal history involving violence, drugs, and weapons charges, Adam Montgomery was granted full custody of Harmony. Child Services had raised concerns. Interstate home evaluations in New Hampshire had not even been fully completed yet. Still, the court approved the transfer. And just like that, Harmony was taken from the most stable environment she had ever known and moved to Manchester, New Hampshire. Adam brought her to 77 Guilford Street, a deteriorating apartment house where he lived with his wife Kayla and their 2 young sons. The conditions inside were unstable almost immediately. Electricity regularly failed. Extension cords ran across rooms from generators outside. Food was inconsistent. Drug use surrounded the household. Yet from the outside, the family still managed to drift beneath the attention of the system that was supposed to monitor Harmony's safety. She was never properly enrolled in school. No regular pediatric care was established in New Hampshire. A scheduled eye surgery quietly disappeared from the timeline. As the months passed, people around the family began noticing troubling details. Harmony sometimes appeared with bruising. Neighbors described frequent yelling inside the apartment. Relatives later admitted the children often looked neglected and exhausted. Then, near the end of 2019, the family lost the apartment entirely. By winter, 5 people were living out of a small sedan in freezing New Hampshire temperatures. Adam, Kayla, their boys, and 5-year-old Harmony. And according to later testimony, life inside that car was becoming increasingly volatile. A child already living in instability, a father with a violent temper, a family collapsing under drugs, homelessness, and pressure. And almost nobody outside that circle looking closely enough to understand how dangerous the situation around Harmony was becoming. By late November 2019, the Montgomery family had lost the apartment on Guilford Street. What came next was unstable, even by the standards Harmony had already grown used to. Adam Montgomery, his wife Kayla, their 2 boys, and 5-year-old Harmony began spending nights inside a small sedan during the freezing New Hampshire winter. Some nights the family parked near shelters or friends' apartments. Other nights they simply stayed inside the car until morning. According to later testimony, the stress inside the vehicle kept building. Harmony had frequent accidents. She wet herself often. Something people close to the case later connected to fear, instability, cold temperatures, and the conditions the family was living in at the time. And as December approached, witnesses would later describe Adam Montgomery becoming increasingly volatile. Then came December 7th, 2019. According to Kayla Montgomery's later testimony, she woke during the early morning hours inside the car to violence involving Harmony in the back seat. She described Adam becoming enraged after Harmony had another accident. What exactly happened inside that vehicle during the following hours would later become one of the most disturbing parts of the entire case. But even investigators struggled for years to fully reconstruct the timeline. At some point that morning, Adam reportedly drove to a methadone clinic before returning to the vehicle. The family continued moving through Manchester as if the day were unfolding normally. Then came one detail investigators would later revisit repeatedly because of how ordinary it sounded against everything else surrounding the case. The family stopped for breakfast at Burger King. People ordered food. The boys ate in the car. Traffic moved through the city like any other winter morning. And somewhere inside that same vehicle, according to later testimony, Harmony was no longer responding. But no ambulance was called. No hospital visit followed. No police report was made. Instead, life around the family appeared to continue moving forward. Outside the car, nobody passing by would have known anything was wrong. No statewide alert existed. No search teams were looking for a missing child. To the rest of the world, Harmony Montgomery was still simply another little girl somewhere in Manchester, New Hampshire. But behind the shifting explanations and missing timelines that investigators would later spend years untangling, something inside the story had already changed permanently. And by the time authorities finally began understanding how serious the situation around Harmony may have been, the trail leading back to those freezing days in December 2019 had already started disappearing piece by piece. For nearly 2 years, Harmony Montgomery existed in a strange kind of silence. No school records, no doctor visits, no confirmed sightings. And somehow, nobody formally reported her missing until November 18th, 2021, when Harmony's biological mother, Crystal Sore, walked into the Manchester Police Department asking a question investigators would soon realize nobody around the child could answer clearly. Where was Harmony? At first, the case did not immediately look like a homicide investigation. Detectives were used to complicated custody disputes, unstable families, parents blaming each other. Adam Montgomery told police Harmony had been living with her mother for quite some time. Other relatives repeated versions of similar explanations. But as investigators started checking timelines, almost nothing held together cleanly. There were no recent photos of Harmony, no school enrollment in New Hampshire, no medical appointments, no verified adult outside the family who could confidently say they had seen her alive during the final stretch of 2019. The deeper detectives looked, the stranger the case became. Then investigators finally reached Kayla Montgomery, Adam's estranged wife. By that point, Kayla had already separated from Adam following years of instability and abuse inside the relationship. During interviews with investigators, she began providing details that dramatically changed the direction of the case. According to later court testimony, the violence surrounding Harmony inside the family had been escalating long before anyone realized the child was missing. And suddenly, detectives were no longer trying to determine whether Harmony had disappeared. They were trying to determine when she had died. In early 2022, investigators searched the former Guildford Street property where the family had once lived. Inside the apartment, they discovered evidence in an area above the ceiling tiles that forensic testing later connected to human decomposition. But even after that discovery, one enormous problem remained. There was still no body. And without Harmony herself, investigators were forced to rebuild the case almost entirely through timelines, witness statements, phone records, rental documents, surveillance footage, and the constantly shifting explanations surrounding Adam Montgomery's movements after December 2019. One detail quickly drew particular attention. Months after Harmony was last believed to be alive, Adam had rented a U-Haul truck and traveled into Massachusetts. A trip investigators later examined closely while attempting to reconstruct what may have happened to Harmony's remains. By then, public attention surrounding the case had exploded across the country. People were no longer asking how a little girl disappeared. They were asking how a child could seemingly vanish from the system for so long without triggering immediate intervention from schools, medical providers, or child protection agencies. Then, in August 2022, New Hampshire authorities made the announcement many people had already begun fearing was coming. Harmony Montgomery was officially presumed murdered. Adam Montgomery was charged with second-degree murder along with multiple additional charges connected to the case. But even after the arrest, the central piece of the investigation remained missing. Harmony herself had still never been found, and that absence changed the entire nature of the case moving forward. Because investigators were now trying to prosecute the murder of a 5-year-old little girl whose remains had never been recovered, while also untangling years of neglect, shifting stories, failed oversight, and missing pieces inside a timeline that still wasn't completely understood. By the time Adam Montgomery finally stood trial, the case had already haunted New Hampshire for years. A little girl was missing. No body had ever been recovered. And yet prosecutors were preparing to convince a jury that Harmony Montgomery had been murdered. Inside a story built mostly from fragments, timelines, and the testimony of the people who once lived around her. The courtroom quickly became the place where those fragments were finally forced together. Jurors listened as prosecutors reconstructed the final months of Harmony's life piece by piece. The unstable apartment on Guildford Street, the eviction, the freezing sedan, the violence witnesses later described inside the vehicle during December 2019. Then came the testimony everyone had been waiting for. Kayla Montgomery took the stand. For days, the courtroom sat in near silence while Adam's estranged wife described what prosecutors believed happened to Harmony after the family lost housing and began living inside the car. Kayla testified that Adam's violence toward Harmony had escalated over time, especially after the child wet herself during those freezing winter nights. And then prosecutors moved into the part of the case that many people following the investigation had struggled to fully comprehend for years. According to testimony presented in court, Harmony's death was followed by months of concealment. While Adam continued moving between apartments, shelters, parking lots, and temporary locations across Manchester. Prosecutors alleged Harmony's remains were hidden inside a duffel bag and moved repeatedly as Adam tried to avoid detection. The courtroom also heard details surrounding the rented U-Haul truck investigators had spent years examining. Prosecutors argued the vehicle became part of a deliberate effort to permanently separate Harmony from the evidence investigators needed most: her remains. And still, despite everything presented during trial, one reality never changed. Harmony herself was never found. That absence hung over the courtroom constantly. Because the prosecution was attempting something extremely rare, securing a murder conviction in a case where the victim had never been recovered physically. The defense attacked Kayla's credibility aggressively. They reminded jurors she had lived alongside Adam during much of the timeline investigators reconstructed. They questioned inconsistencies in her statements and argued prosecutors were relying heavily on testimony from someone trying to save herself. But prosecutors focused the jury on something larger than a single witness: the missing records. The decomposition evidence found inside the apartment, the shifting explanations surrounding Harmony's whereabouts, the complete disappearance of a medically vulnerable 5-year-old child from every normal part of public life. And perhaps most damaging of all, nobody outside the family could clearly place Harmony alive after late 2019. When the verdict finally came, the emotional reaction inside the courtroom was immediate. Adam Montgomery was found guilty of murdering his daughter. He was later sentenced to decades in prison, ensuring he would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. But even after the conviction, the feeling inside the case did not resemble closure, because no jury verdict could answer the one question still sitting at the center of everything. Where is Harmony Montgomery? Years after she vanished, investigators still could not bring her home. No burial, no grave, no final place for the people who loved her to visit. Only a conviction, a missing child, and a courtroom full of people forced to confront how completely a little girl had disappeared before the world truly realized she was gone. After the verdict, many people expected the Harmony Montgomery case to finally feel finished. Adam Montgomery was convicted. The courtroom had heard the testimony. The headlines moved across the country. But for a lot of people following the case, the anger only grew stronger afterward. Because once the noise of the trial faded, one question became impossible to ignore. How many chances were there to save Harmony before she disappeared completely? The deeper people looked into her life, the more the failures seemed stacked on top of each other. Harmony was born into instability almost immediately. Her mother struggled with addiction. Her father spent much of her early life incarcerated. Child protection agencies became involved when she was still an infant. For years, Harmony moved through foster care systems designed specifically to protect vulnerable children like her. And yet somehow, the child everyone claimed to be monitoring slowly became harder and harder to see. When custody was transferred to Adam Montgomery in 2019, warning signs already existed. He had a violent criminal history. Concerns had been raised about the home environment. Interstate evaluations were not fully completed. Even people close to the case later questioned how aggressively the risks were actually examined before Harmony was sent across state lines. Then came everything that followed afterward. A medically vulnerable little girl disappeared from school systems entirely. No regular pediatric care, no completed eye treatment, no consistent welfare checks. At one point, Harmony was reportedly living inside a freezing car during a New Hampshire winter, while adults around her struggled with addiction and instability. And still, there was no immediate intervention strong enough to remove her from that environment. That realization hit many people harder than the conviction itself, because Harmony did not vanish in a single moment. According to everything investigators later uncovered, she seemed to disappear gradually, piece by piece, while different systems, agencies, adults, relatives, neighbors, and institutions each saw only fragments of the larger danger surrounding her life. Some people noticed bruises, others noticed neglect, others simply assumed someone else was checking on her. And somewhere inside all those missed moments, a little girl stopped existing publicly long before anyone officially reported her missing. That may be the detail that continues haunting this case more than anything revealed during trial. Not only the violence, not only the concealment, but the terrifying idea that Harmony Montgomery became socially invisible before she became physically missing. Even now, years later, investigators still have not recovered her remains. There is no confirmed gravesite, no place for the people who loved her to visit, no final moment of closure waiting at the end of the story. Only photographs, fragments of testimony, and the memory of a 5-year-old girl who spent much of her short life surrounded by systems that were supposed to protect children, while somehow continuing to fall through every one of them.
No, I was not. He said he thinks that he really hurt her. He felt something.
When did you realize that Harmony had passed away?
When Adam was trying to wake her up and she didn't reply or anything.
Was he saying things to her to try to wake her up?
Yeah, he said Harmony, and he kept saying baby girl, like, and trying to budge her, and there was nothing.
For perjury, for lying on to the jury about the whereabouts of where I was and where Harmony was.
I'm trying my hardest to have it be a happy day. We're doing a double birthday. It's my 2-year-old niece's birthday. Harmony was so kind. She wouldn't have cared, you know? She would have loved that. She's sharing her birthday party with her 2-year-old cousin. She would have loved that, you know? She needs to be with me. She needs to be home with me, with her family. And we should be able to sprinkle her like glitter, the glitter that she was, wherever we feel like she would want to go. She's still waiting for us to look for her.
Even after the conviction, the search for Harmony Montgomery never truly stopped. Investigators in New Hampshire continue following leads connected to possible locations where Harmony's remains may have been moved after her death. Over the years, authorities have searched apartments, abandoned properties, wooded areas, dumpsters, river locations, and sites connected to Adam Montgomery's movements across both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Tips still come in. Search warrants are still executed. And every so often, investigators revisit old timelines, hoping one overlooked detail might finally lead them to Harmony herself. But as the years pass, the case has started leaving behind a different kind of weight. Not the shock that came when the story first exploded across national headlines. Not the courtroom tension during trial. Something quieter. Because eventually, every missing child case reaches the point where people begin asking themselves a difficult question. What happens when the world keeps moving, but the child never comes home? Harmony would be growing older now. The little girl with the cloudy eye and pink toys would be entering entirely different stages of life. Birthdays, school years, friendships, memories she never got the chance to have. Instead, her story remains frozen in fragments from 2019. Surveillance footage, court testimony, old photographs from foster care files. And maybe that's why this case continues lingering with so many people long after the verdict. Not simply because of what prosecutors said happened to Harmony, but because of how easy it became for her absence to blend into the background before anyone realized something irreversible had already happened. A child disappeared from everyday life, then from public systems, then almost from memory itself. Until one day, investigators were forced to reconstruct an entire little girl's final years from scattered records, broken timelines, and the people who failed her along the way. Even now, Harmony Montgomery still has not been found. And somewhere out there, there is still a place, unknown to investigators, unknown to the public, where the final missing piece of this story may still be waiting. If there is one reason this case continues to resonate across the country, it may be this. Harmony's story forces people to confront how easily vulnerable children can disappear when enough adults stop paying attention at the same time. And maybe the most important thing anyone can do now is make sure she is never invisible again. Because as long as people continue speaking her name, sharing her story, and demanding accountability from the systems that failed her, Harmony Montgomery remains more than just another closed courtroom case. She remains a little girl who still deserves to be brought home.
You know, you have this idea in your mind of what happened and how it happened. I wasn't prepared to hear what I heard that day.
I remember
hearing a knock at the door. Sounded like a cop knock, you know. And
they sat me down and they told me that she was deceased.